My name is Eli, and I just turned 30 yesterday. I woke up to check my bank account like I always do, except this time, my $88,000 was gone. When I confronted my parents, my mother laughed and said, "What were you gonna do, buy yourself a cake?" My father simply shrugged and told me, the family needed it more. What they forgot is that I was the guarantor on their mortgage. Before I tell you how I made my parents beg for mercy, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of people who stand up for themselves. I grew up in Seattle's Ballard neighborhood, in a modest two-story house with peeling blue paint that my parents, Michael and Diana, always complained about. They were obsessed with appearances, even though our financial situation never quite matched their ambitions. My childhood memories are filled with strange contrasts. While I wore second-hand clothes to school, my parents somehow always managed to drive luxury cars they could barely afford. They would host lavish dinner parties for neighbors and colleagues, then quietly fight about credit card bills the next morning when they thought I was still asleep. My grandfather was different. He lived two neighborhoods over in a small apartment filled with books and old computers. Visiting him was my escape. He was the one who noticed my fascination with how things worked, especially computers. When I was 12, he gave me my first computer, a refurbished desktop that became my most prized possession. "Your mind works like a programmer, Eli," he would say. "You see patterns where others see chaos." He passed away when I was 16, leaving me his collection of programming books and a small savings bond that would later help pay for my first semester of college. College wasn't easy. My parents made too much money on paper for me to qualify for significant financial aid, but not enough to actually help me. Or at least that's what they claimed. So I worked. I balanced classes in computer science with jobs at the campus help desk, weekend shifts at a local electronics store, and summer internships. I lived off ramen and coffee, sharing a cramped apartment with 3 other students to save every possible dollar. Despite the exhaustion, I thrived academically. My professors noticed my dedication, and by my junior year, I had secured a prestigious internship at a growing tech company. That internship turned into a job offer before I even graduated. Starting as a junior developer, I put in countless hours debugging code late into the night, volunteering for the projects no one else wanted, and slowly building a reputation as someone who could solve problems others couldn't. 5 years and 3 promotions later, I had reached senior developer status at 30. My salary had more than tripled since my starting position. But unlike many of my colleagues who upgraded to luxury apartments and expensive cars as soon as their paychecks grew, I maintained my frugal lifestyle. I lived in a modest 1-bedroom apartment, drove my reliable 10-year-old Honda, and focused on my singular goal: saving for a home of my own. That $88,000 represented 4 years of disciplined saving. Every bonus, tax refund, and raise went straight into that account. It was my down payment fund for a small house in one of Seattle's quieter neighborhoods. I had even started browsing listings, imagining waking up in a space that was truly mine, with a small garden out back where I could grow vegetables like my grandfather had taught me. As my financial situation improved, I had cautiously begun rebuilding my relationship with my parents. Our interactions had always been strained, especially during my college years when they seemed disappointed that I wasn't pursuing a more prestigious career path like medicine or law. But recently, they had started to show what I thought was pride in my accomplishments. They mentioned my promotions to family friends. My mother even asked for advice about her new smartphone. My father invited me to watch football games at their house. I thought perhaps we were finally moving toward a healthier relationship. On the morning of my 30th birthday, I followed my usual routine. Wake up at 6, go for a 5-mile run, shower, and check my financial accounts before getting ready for work. I had planned to treat myself to dinner at my favorite restaurant that evening, maybe even splurge on a nice bottle of wine. But when I logged into my bank account, my heart stopped. My savings account balance read $27.36. Just the day before, it had been $88,412. Panicking, I called the bank immediately. The representative confirmed my worst fear. A transfer for $88,385 had been processed yesterday afternoon. The destination account belonged to Michael and Diana Johnson, my parents. There had to be some mistake. Maybe they were surprising me with something for my birthday, though that seemed completely out of character. Maybe there was a family emergency they hadn't told me about. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years and drove straight to their house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel the entire 30-minute drive. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, I noticed their cars were both there, my father's new Audi SUV gleaming in the morning sun. The house looked exactly the same as always, no signs of emergency or distress. The garden my mother obsessed over was perfectly manicured, and the American flag my father insisted on displaying was fluttering gently in the breeze. I rang the doorbell, my heart racing. My mother answered wearing an expensive-looking silk robe I had never seen before. "Eli, what a surprise." "Happy birthday, sweetie," she said, air kissing next to my cheek, the scent of her favorite French perfume overwhelming. "Why aren't you at work?" I stepped inside, noticing immediately that their living room had been redecorated. A massive 75-inch smart TV now dominated the wall, where their modest 50-inch had been just 2 weeks ago when I last visited. The worn leather sofa had been replaced by a sleek sectional that looked straight out of a luxury furniture catalog. "Mom, where's Dad?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "In his study." "Michael." "Eli's here," she called out. My father emerged wearing a brand new golf shirt with the tag still attached. He gave me an awkward half-hug, patting my back twice before quickly stepping away. "Happy birthday, son." "Taking the day off." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I need to ask you both something." Did you transfer money from my account yesterday?" There was a moment of silence. They exchanged a quick glance I couldn't quite interpret. Then my mother laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh or an embarrassed one. It was dismissive, almost cruel. "What were you gonna do, buy yourself a cake?" she said, walking over to adjust a new crystal vase filled with fresh flowers. I turned to my father, hoping for some rational explanation. His face was expressionless, like a stone wall. "The family needed it more," he said simply, as if that explained everything. "Family needed what more?" "My entire savings," my voice cracked. "That was $88,000. Everything I've saved for 4 years." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please, it's not like you were using it. And we have expenses, Eli. You have no idea what it costs to maintain this lifestyle." I looked around the room again, really seeing it now. Besides the new TV and sofa, there were shopping bags from high-end stores stacked in the corner. A receipt on the coffee table caught my eye, showing a $5,000 payment to American Express. "You stole my money to pay off credit cards and buy furniture?" I asked incredulously. "Don't be so dramatic," my father said. "We're your parents. It's not stealing when it stays in the family." Still in shock, I moved to sit down, needing something solid beneath me. As I sank into their new sofa, I noticed travel documents on the side table. Picking them up, I saw confirmation for a 10-day Caribbean cruise departing next month. The total, $12,000 for a luxury suite. You're going on a cruise. With my money, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My mother snatched the papers from my hand. We deserve a vacation. Your father's been working so hard, and you know my migraines have been terrible lately. When were you planning to tell me about taking my money? Were you ever going to pay me back? I asked, already knowing the answer deep down. My father crossed his arms. Look, you're doing well. You can save it up again. You're young, you have time. We're getting older, and we want to enjoy life a little. That money was for a house. My house. I've been saving for years, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Houses are overrated, my mother replied. Especially for someone single. What do you need all that space for anyway? I felt physically ill, my stomach twisting into knots. I need that money back. All of it. My parents exchanged another look, this one clearer. Annoyance. We can discuss a repayment plan, my father said reluctantly. Maybe a small amount each month. But most of it's already spent or allocated. Allocated. It's been less than 24 hours, I exclaimed. Bills pile up, Eli. You'll understand when you're older, my mother said condescendingly. Now, we were thinking of taking you to dinner tonight for your birthday. That new steakhouse downtown. Our treat. She smiled as if she just offered me the world's greatest gift. I stood up, unable to remain in their presence any longer. You want to take me to dinner with my own money? Are you serious right now? Don't be ungrateful, my father warned, his voice taking on the edge it always did when I was a child and questioned their decisions. After everything we've done for you. I walked toward the door, needing to escape before I said something I couldn't take back. I have to go. Eli, my mother called after me. Don't make this into a bigger deal than it is. Family helps family. I didn't respond, just got into my car and drove. Halfway home, I had to pull over because my hands were shaking too badly to steer. I sat there on the shoulder of the highway, cars rushing past, trying to process what had just happened. The betrayal felt physical, like someone had reached into my chest and crushed my heart. That night, alone in my apartment on my 30th birthday, I didn't celebrate. I didn't even eat. I just sat in the dark, replaying every interaction with my parents over the years, seeing patterns I had been too loyal to recognize before. This wasn't the first time they had taken from me, just the largest and most brazen example. The trust between us, already fragile, had shattered completely. And I had no idea what to do next. The week after discovering my parents' theft was the worst of my life. I couldn't focus at work, staring blankly at my computer screen while lines of code blurred before my eyes. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by tossing and turning, replaying conversations with my parents in my head, thinking of all the things I should have said. When exhaustion finally claimed me for an hour or two, I'd wake up hoping it had all been a nightmare, only to check my account and face the harsh reality again. What made it all worse were the text messages from my parents. They acted as if nothing had happened. My mother sent a casual "hope you had a good birthday" text 2 days after. My father forwarded an article about the Seahawks' newest draft pick with just "thought you'd find this interesting." No mention of the money, no acknowledgement of the harm they'd caused. It was surreal, like living in an alternate reality. I met with a representative at my bank, a sympathetic woman named Alicia who grimaced when I explained the situation. She pulled up the transaction details, showing me that my parents had used the online access I had given them years ago during college when I was traveling abroad and needed them to transfer money into my account for an emergency. I had completely forgotten about it. They hadn't accessed my account in nearly 8 years, until now. I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, but since they had authorized access, this is considered a civil matter, not fraud, she explained gently. You would need to pursue legal action to recover the funds. I filed a police report anyway, but as expected, the officer classified it as a civil dispute and suggested I consult an attorney. Walking out of the police station, I felt even more alone than before. That weekend, my phone rang constantly with calls from extended family members. Apparently, my parents had been busy. My Aunt Susan called first, her voice tight with disapproval. Eli, your mother told me what happened. I can't believe you went to the police over a family matter. I tried to explain, but she interrupted. They said you were planning to donate money to help with their retirement, but changed your mind. Now you're claiming they stole from you. That's a serious accusation against your own parents. Similar conversations followed with my Uncle Robert, 2 cousins, and even my grandmother. Each time the story my parents had told varied slightly, but the theme remained the same. I had promised them money, then cruelly retracted the offer, leaving them in financial distress. The most infuriating call came from my Uncle Jack. You make all this money in tech while your father's plumbing business barely stays afloat, he lectured. The least you could do is help your parents out. After all they sacrificed for you. I wanted to scream. What sacrifices? The college education they didn't pay for. The birthdays they forgot. The graduation they skipped because they were on vacation in Mexico. After that call, I tore through my filing cabinet, looking for old financial documents. I had a vague memory of my parents borrowing my first tax refund check when I was 19, promising to pay it back with interest. I never saw that money again. To my frustration, those documents were missing from my otherwise meticulously organized files. On day 9 after the theft, I received an email from my mother that made me physically nauseous. Eli, your father and I are concerned about your mental health. You've always been prone to anxiety, and we think the pressure of your job might be affecting your judgment. We only want what's best for you. Remember how we supported you through college. Remember all those nights I stayed up helping you with homework. We've always put you first, and it hurts that you would accuse us of stealing when we've only ever acted out of love. Please seek help. We can recommend Dr. Patterson, who helped your cousin Tyler with his anger issues. Every sentence was a calculated lie. They hadn't supported me through college. My mother had never once helped me with homework. And I had never had anxiety issues they had helped me through. It was gaslighting, pure and simple, trying to make me doubt my own memories and perceptions. That afternoon, I broke down during lunch with a colleague, Nate, who had become a good friend over the years. I hadn't planned to tell anyone at work about my situation, but when he asked why I seemed so distracted lately, everything spilled out. Eli, man, I'm so sorry, he said when I finished. But listen to me. What your parents did isn't normal. It's not just family being family, it's abuse. Financial abuse. Financial abuse, the term was new to me. Yeah. My sister went through something similar with her ex-husband. Controlling people through money, making you financially vulnerable, using your resources without consent, that's abuse. And from what you've told me, this isn't the first time they've done something like this. That evening, I searched for information about financial abuse, and everything I read resonated deeply. One article led me to find a therapist who specialized in family trauma. In our first session, Dr. Abigail Thompson listened carefully to my story. What you're describing is a lifetime pattern of exploitation, she said. The $88,000 is just the most recent and extreme example. But I suspect if we examine your history with your parents, we'll find numerous instances where they've violated your boundaries, particularly around money. She was right. As we talked, memories surfaced. My parents borrowing my birthday money from relatives when I was a child. My college scholarship check that mysteriously needed to be held in their account. The guilt trips when I wouldn't lend them money for luxury purchases in my early 20s. Over the next few days, I began investigating my parents' financial history more thoroughly. What I discovered shocked me. My father's plumbing business wasn't failing, as family members had suggested. It was quite successful, with contracts for several large commercial properties. My mother, who had always claimed to work as an administrative assistant, was actually the office manager for the business, drawing a substantial salary. Then I remembered something crucial. Shortly after getting my first real job, my parents had refinanced their mortgage. Because of their previous bankruptcy, another fact they had hidden from family, they needed a cosigner. They had convinced me it was just a formality, that they would make all the payments, and that helping them would improve my credit score. Being 24 and naive, I had agreed to be their guarantor. I pulled out the mortgage documents I had stored in my safe deposit box. Reading through the legal language with new eyes, I realized just how vulnerable my position was. If they defaulted, I would be fully responsible for their monthly payments of $3,200. But I also discovered something else. As a guarantor, I had certain rights, including access to information about the account and, under specific circumstances, the ability to take action. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not just for recovering my money, but for finally establishing the boundaries I should have set years ago. My therapist had helped me see that my parents' theft wasn't an impulsive decision or a one-time lapse in judgment. This had been calculated. They had waited until they knew my savings had reached a substantial amount. They had deliberately maintained access to my account for years without using it, keeping that backdoor available for when it would benefit them most. And now they were systematically turning family members against me to isolate me and make me doubt myself. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about recognizing a lifetime of manipulation and deciding it would go no further. 2 weeks after discovering the theft, I visited my grandmother at her assisted living facility. Unlike the rest of the family, she hadn't called to berate me, and I hoped she might be more objective. She had always been kind, if somewhat distant, and I thought perhaps she might help mediate the situation. We sat in the facility's garden, watching residents play a slow-motion game of croquet on the lawn. Her hands trembled slightly as she sipped her tea, a symptom of the Parkinson's she'd been battling for years. "Your mother told me you're upset about some money," she said, her voice frail but her eyes sharp as ever. "Did she tell you how much money, Grandma?" She shook her head. "Just that you had promised to help them and changed your mind." I took a deep breath. They took $88,000 from my account without asking. My entire savings. Her teacup clattered against the saucer. "What? That can't be right." "It is." They admitted it to my face. Said the family needed it more than I did. She was silent for a long moment, staring at the croquet players. "Michael always did have expensive tastes," she finally said, referring to my father. "Even as a boy. Never understood the value of money." "Did Mom tell you what they spent it on?" "Home repairs, I think. Something about the foundation." I laughed bitterly. They bought a new TV, furniture, paid off credit cards, and booked a Caribbean cruise. My grandmother's face fell. "Oh, Eli. I'm so sorry." That's, that's not right. No, it's not. She fidgeted with her napkin, clearly uncomfortable. They've been planning this for a while, you know. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? She looked instantly regretful, as if she'd said too much. Nothing, just that they mentioned needing to access some funds. Grandma, please. I need to know the truth. She sighed heavily. About 3 months ago, they visited. They were excited about something, whispered a lot. Your mother left her purse in my bathroom, and when I went to return it, some papers fell out. I didn't mean to look, but... What did you see? Emails? Printouts? They were discussing something about Eli's nest egg and the best time to access it. She reached for my hand, her papery skin cool against mine. I thought it was some kind of investment they were helping you with. I never imagined. I felt sick. Do you remember anything else from those emails? She closed her eyes, concentrating. There was something about waiting until it reached a certain amount. And your father wrote something like, he trusts us completely, that's our advantage. Each word felt like a physical blow. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had calculated, planned, and gloated about it. Discussed the best timing to maximize what they could take from me. Laughed about my trust being a weakness they could exploit. Was there anything about what they planned to use the money for? I asked, my voice hollow. She nodded slowly. Your father wrote something about before he wasted on a house. I remember because it seemed odd. Why would buying a home be wasteful? I thanked my grandmother and left shortly after, my mind reeling. In the parking lot, my phone rang. It was my father. What the hell did you say to your grandmother? He demanded without greeting. She just called your mother crying. I told her the truth, I said, surprised by the calmness in my voice. You had no right to upset her with family business. Family business? You mean like stealing $88,000 from your son? We've been through this, Eli. It wasn't stealing. And now you're dragging an elderly woman into it. She has health problems. Do you want her to have a stroke? The manipulation was so transparent now that I could see it clearly. Using my grandmother's health to deflect from their actions, trying to make me feel guilty for telling the truth. I'm coming over, I said. We need to talk face to face. 20 minutes later, I stood on their doorstep again. This time, neither of them greeted me with fake cheerfulness. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, though I suspected the tears were strategic rather than genuine. My father stood with arms crossed, jaw set in defiance. I know everything, I said as I walked past them into the living room. I know you planned this for months. I know you joked about my trust being an advantage. I know you took my money specifically to prevent me from buying a house. My mother's performance began immediately. Tears flowed freely now as she collapsed onto the sofa. How can you say such things? After all we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? Name one significant sacrifice you've made for my benefit. We gave you life, my father shouted, his face reddening. We put a roof over your head, food in your mouth. The bare legal minimum required of parents, I countered. And now I want to know. Are you planning to pay back the money you stole from me? My mother sniffled dramatically. We told you we can work out a payment plan. Maybe $100 a month. I did the math quickly. That would take over 73 years. Well, we don't have it all at once, my father said, annoyed. You know that. Actually, I don't know that. Because you spent $12,000 on a cruise and thousands more on furniture and electronics. Those things can be returned. The cruise can be canceled. My father's face hardened. We're not canceling anything. That money is spent, Eli. You need to accept that and move on. So you're saying you have no intention of paying me back in full? Ever? My parents exchanged a look. In that silent communication, I saw the truth. "We're your retirement plan, Eli," my mother said. Her tears mysteriously dried up. "Single, no kid, successful career. Who else would your money go to eventually? We just needed it a little sooner." I stared at them in disbelief. "You think you're entitled to my money because I'm single? Because you assume I'll never have a family of my own?" "Don't be dramatic," my father said. "All parents expect their children to take care of them in old age, especially successful children. And you think stealing from me is the way to ensure that?" My mother stood up, suddenly dropping the fragile act entirely. "You know what your problem is, Eli. You've always been selfish. Even as a child. Always in your own world with your computers, never thinking about the family." "Selfish?" "I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college because you wouldn't help me. We had our own expenses," my father dismissed. "And look at you now. All high and mighty with your programming job, thinking you're better than us." That's when I finally understood. Behind the theft, behind the manipulation, was something I hadn't seen before. Resentment. My parents resented my success, my independence, my ability to save money when they lived paycheck to paycheck despite earning more. They claimed to be proud of me to others, but privately, they seethed with jealousy. "You're not proud of me at all, are you?" I asked quietly. My father's expression confirmed it before he spoke. "Pride? You think sitting at a computer all day typing nonsense is something to be proud of? I work with my hands. I build things. What do you create except electric garbage that will be obsolete in a year?" Every illusion I had maintained about our relationship shattered in that moment. These people didn't see me as a son to love and support. I was a resource to exploit, an investment that had finally matured enough to cash in. "I'm done," I said, standing up. "Don't contact me again. Don't call, don't text, don't email. If you need to communicate with me, do it through a lawyer." "Don't be ridiculous," my mother snapped. "We're your parents. You don't get to just walk away." "Actually, I do." I moved toward the door. "And one more thing. I know about the mortgage refinance you did 6 months ago. The one I'm still guarantor on." For the first time, I saw genuine fear flash in my father's eyes. "That's just a formality," he said quickly. "Nothing for you to worry about. We'll see." As I walked to my car, my mother called after me. "You'll regret this, Eli. Family is all you have in this world." I didn't respond, just got in my car and drove away from the house I grew up in, knowing I would never willingly return. The drive home was a blur. Somewhere along the way, the numbness that had protected me during the confrontation wore off, and the full weight of what had happened crashed down on me. By the time I reached my apartment, I could barely see through my tears. I made it inside before completely breaking down, sliding down against my closed door until I sat on the floor, sobbing like I hadn't since I was a child. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was mourning the family I thought I had, the parents I deserved but never had. It was grieving the relationship I had spent 30 years trying to build on a foundation that was never there. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes burned, until there was nothing left but hollow exhaustion. That night was my rock bottom. Curled up in bed, I felt more alone than I ever had before. But somewhere in that darkest moment, a small voice inside me whispered that this wasn't the end. This was a terrible, painful liberation. For the first time in my life, I was seeing my parents clearly, without the filter of obligation or hope or denial. And with that clarity would come the power to finally break free. I woke the next morning with swollen eyes and a strange sense of calm. The storm of emotions had passed, leaving behind a clear, cold determination. I showered, made coffee, and sat down at my kitchen table with a notebook. It was time to take control. My first call was to a financial advisor named David Wright, who had been recommended by Nate. After explaining my situation, he didn't waste time with sympathy. "This is more common than you might think," he said matter-of-factly. "Family financial exploitation is a growing problem, especially as millennials start building wealth. Let's talk about your options." We discussed legal remedies for recovering the stolen money, the likelihood of success, moderate but not guaranteed, and the potential costs, both financial and emotional, of pursuing a lawsuit against my parents. "Before we go further," David said, "I should mention that as a guarantor on their mortgage, you have more leverage than you might realize." This was the opening I had been hoping for. "What kind of leverage exactly?" "Let me refer you to someone who can explain the details better than I can. Miranda Lopez, she specializes in these situations." The next day, I sat in Miranda's office, a small but elegant space in a downtown high-rise. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who listened to my story without interruption, taking occasional notes. "First, let me be clear," she said when I finished. "What your parents did was theft, regardless of family relationship. You have grounds for both civil and potentially criminal charges. The police said it was a civil matter. Police often say that to avoid getting involved in family disputes. But that doesn't change the legal reality." She leaned forward. "Now about this mortgage guarantee. When did you last review the terms?" "Yesterday. But the legal language is dense." She nodded. "Most people never read the fine print. But as a guarantor, you have specific rights and obligations. One of those rights is access to information about the account status. Have you requested that?" "Not yet." "You should. Because if there's any indication of fraud or misrepresentation in the refinancing process, you may have grounds to petition for removal as guarantor." My heart rate quickened. What would constitute fraud or misrepresentation? Did they accurately represent their income and expenses when refinancing? Did they disclose all debts? Did they inform the lender of any significant changes to their financial situation? These are all required disclosures. Given what I now knew about my parents' spending habits and their secret planning to take my money, it seemed highly unlikely they had been fully transparent with the mortgage company. And if I find evidence of fraud, Miranda's expression was serious, then you could potentially have the guarantee nullified, leaving them solely responsible for the mortgage. But be aware, this would likely trigger a review of their loan terms by the lender, possibly resulting in higher interest rates or even foreclosure if they can't qualify on their own. What would I need to do? First, request all documentation related to the refinance. Review it carefully for any inconsistencies. Then we can discuss next steps. Over the next week, I followed Miranda's advice meticulously. I requested and received copies of all mortgage documents, credit applications, and income verifications my parents had submitted. What I found confirmed my suspicions. They had significantly overstated their income, understated their debts, and failed to disclose several recent credit inquiries. Most damning of all, they had listed me as a co-owner on the application rather than merely a guarantor, something I had never agreed to. In my follow-up meeting with Miranda, she reviewed my findings with growing interest. "This is textbook misrepresentation," she said. "They not only lied about their financial status, but falsely claimed you as a co-owner without your consent. That alone could be grounds for nullification of your guarantee. What's the process for that? We file a formal complaint with the lender, providing evidence of the misrepresentation. Under these circumstances, there's a specific clause in most guarantee agreements allowing for immediate cancellation. I hesitated, fully understanding the implications. If I do this, what happens to them? Best case scenario, they'll need to find another guarantor or provide additional collateral to maintain their current terms. Worst case, the lender could call the loan due immediately or significantly increase their interest rate to offset the increased risk. Could they lose their house? Potentially, yes. If they can't meet the new terms and can't sell quickly enough to pay off the loan. I sat with that knowledge, turning it over in my mind. Part of me felt guilty for even considering an action that could result in my parents losing their home. But another part remembered their callous disregard for my future, their willingness to take my dream of homeownership from me without a second thought. While I was wrestling with this decision, my Uncle Jack called again, this time leaving a voicemail full of thinly veiled threats about consequences for disrespecting my parents. 3 other family members sent similar messages. My mother emailed twice daily, alternating between guilt trips and anger. My father texted demanding I stop this childish tantrum. Their pressure only strengthened my resolve. I consulted with Dr. Thompson again, discussing the complex emotions around my potential course of action. Setting boundaries with family is never easy, she said, especially with parents who have consistently violated those boundaries. You need to ask yourself, what outcome would actually be just in this situation? That question stayed with me for days. What would justice look like? A full return of my money seemed like the minimum requirement. But there was also the matter of accountability, of ensuring this pattern couldn't continue. During this time, my friend Nate became an invaluable support. He invited me over for dinner, introduced me to his wife and children, and showed me what healthy family dynamics looked like. In their warm kitchen, playing board games after a home-cooked meal, I glimpsed the kind of family connections I had always yearned for. You know, Nate said as we washed dishes later, family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up for you, who respects your boundaries, who wants the best for you without expecting anything in return. His words resonated deeply. In 30 years, my parents had never shown up for me in the ways that mattered. They had never respected my boundaries or wanted the best for me without self-interest. 2 weeks after my initial meeting with Miranda, I made my decision. I scheduled a final consultation to confirm the legal standing of my plan. She reviewed everything once more, including new documents I had discovered showing my parents had taken out a home equity line of credit just 1 month after the refinance. Another fact they had concealed from both me and likely the mortgage company. Based on all this evidence, you have clear legal grounds to proceed, she confirmed. I can file the paperwork tomorrow if you're certain. I am, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. But I have one condition. I want to be the one to tell them. That night I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my phone. I had drafted and deleted a dozen messages to my parents, none of them feeling right. How do you tell the people who raised you that you're about to upend their lives? Even knowing they deserved consequences, even being certain of my course, it wasn't easy. In the end, I decided against any warning. They had given me none when they drained my account. They had planned their theft meticulously, in secret, laughing about my trust in them. Perhaps it was petty, but I wanted them to feel the same shock I had experienced that birthday morning. As I prepared for bed, I looked at the mortgage documents spread across my coffee table one last time. Tomorrow would change everything, and despite the turmoil of emotions, I felt ready. For the first time since this nightmare began, I was taking control back. I was standing up not just for my money, but for my worth as a person, my right to be treated with basic respect and decency. Family doesn't steal from family, I whispered to the empty room, rehearsing the words I knew I would need to say soon enough. The next evening at precisely 7:30, I sat at my desk with Miranda's instructions and contact information for the mortgage company's emergency customer service line. My hands were steady as I dialed the number, a strange calm having settled over me. Pacific Northwest Mortgage, this is Stephanie speaking. How can I help you tonight? My name is Eli Johnson. I'm a guarantor on mortgage account number 87,642,913, and I need to report fraud and misrepresentation. Stephanie's tone immediately became more formal. I'll need to transfer you to our fraud department. Please hold. After a brief wait, a man with a deep voice introduced himself as Marcus from the fraud investigation team. I explained my situation concisely, stating that I had discovered significant misrepresentation on the mortgage application and refinancing documents. I have evidence that the borrowers falsely listed me as a co-owner without my knowledge, substantially overstated their income, concealed existing debts, and took out a home equity line of credit immediately after refinancing, violating the terms of their agreement. Marcus asked several detailed questions, which I answered with the documentation Miranda had helped me prepare. Given these circumstances, I'm exercising my right under Section 12.4 of the Guarantee Agreement to immediately withdraw as guarantor due to fraud and material misrepresentation. I understand, Mr. Johnson. This is indeed a serious situation. I'll need to initiate our verification procedures right away. Are you available to provide supporting documentation immediately? Yes, I have everything ready to email. For the next hour, I went through a meticulous process of scanning and sending documents, answering follow-up questions, and confirming details about the refinancing process. Marcus was thorough but efficient, clearly experienced with fraud cases. Based on the evidence you've provided, especially regarding the unauthorized co-owner designation and the undisclosed HELOC, we have sufficient grounds to begin the guarantee nullification process immediately, he finally said. You should receive email confirmation within the hour. The primary borrowers will be notified automatically of the change in status. How quickly will this take effect? I asked. The guarantee will be suspended immediately pending final review, which typically takes 24 to 48 hours. Once finalized, the borrowers will be notified of their new loan status and terms. And what will those terms likely be? I can't say with certainty, but given the circumstances, they would likely need to either provide substantial additional collateral, find a new guarantor, or face a significant interest rate adjustment to reflect the increased risk profile. In some cases, the loan may be called due in full. I thanked Marcus and ended the call. True to his word, 30 minutes later, I received a detailed email confirming that my guarantee was suspended pending final review, with a case number and contact information if I had questions. The email also clearly stated that Michael and Diana Johnson would be notified of the change immediately. It was done. I had cut the financial cord that my parents could have used to further exploit me. If they defaulted on their mortgage now, it would not be my responsibility. Moreover, they would likely face significantly higher payments, or potentially even lose the house if they couldn't qualify for the loan on their own merits. I felt no joy, only a somber sense of justice. This wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. My parents had made calculated decisions to harm me financially, and now they would face the natural repercussions of those actions. The first text came at 9:47 p.m., just as I was getting ready for bed. It was from my mother. "What is this email from the mortgage company about a change in guarantee status? Is this your doing?" I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, my father texted, "Call us immediately. There's a problem with the mortgage." Again, I didn't respond. By morning, I had 17 missed calls, 26 text messages, and 5 increasingly frantic emails. My parents had clearly received the full notification, explaining that their guarantee had been suspended due to evidence of fraud and misrepresentation. Their messages evolved from confusion to anger to panic as they realized the implications. The final voicemail from my father was almost unintelligible with rage, threatening legal action, family excommunication, and various creative punishments. He seemed to think he could still impose on his 30-year-old son. I went to work as usual, focusing on the coding project I had fallen behind on during the past few weeks of turmoil. Around lunchtime, I received a text from the security desk in my apartment building. "Mr. Johnson, there are 2 individuals here claiming to be your parents. They are quite insistent on seeing you. How would you like us to proceed?" I had anticipated this and already spoken with building security about not allowing unannounced visitors to my floor. "Please inform them that I'm not available and will not be coming down to meet them," I replied. 20 minutes later, the security guard texted again. "They're refusing to leave and causing a disturbance. Should we call the police?" "No, I'll come down," I responded, not wanting to escalate the situation to that level. I took the elevator down to the lobby, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. When the doors opened, I saw my parents arguing with the security guard, a patient-looking man named Carlos who had worked in the building for years. My mother was crying dramatically, while my father gesticulated angrily. "This is completely unacceptable," my father was saying. "We're his parents, for God's sake." "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson," I said calmly, staying near the elevator. "This isn't the place for this conversation." My mother rushed toward me, arms outstretched as if for a hug, but I stepped back. "Eli, what have you done? The mortgage company is saying our loan is under review for fraud. They're threatening to call the entire amount due. Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private," I suggested, nodding toward Carlos and several residents who were watching the scene with undisguised interest. We moved to a small conference room off the lobby that residents could reserve for meetings. Once the door closed, my father's performance began. "How dare you?" he hissed, jabbing a finger toward me. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. By trying to get us thrown out of our home." "I simply reported the truth," I said, maintaining my calm. "You listed me as a co-owner without my consent. You lied about your income and debts. You took out a HELOC without disclosing it to the lender. All of those actions constitute fraud." "That's just technical paperwork nonsense," my mother exclaimed. "Everyone fudges those numbers a little. The mortgage company doesn't seem to see it that way." My father changed tactics, his face reddening. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Well, we'll see how clever you feel when we sue you for defamation. When we tell everyone in the family what an ungrateful, vindictive son you are." "Go ahead," I said. "And while you're gathering the family, you can explain why you stole $88,000 from me. You can tell them about the Caribbean cruise you booked with my money. The new TV. The furniture. The paid-off credit cards." My mother's tears flowed more freely now. "We're your parents, Eli. How can you do this to us? We gave you life. We raised you. And now you can face the consequences of your actions, just like you've always taught me to do, I replied, remembering all the lectures about responsibility they had given me growing up, lectures they had clearly never applied to themselves. What do you want? My father finally asked, his voice suddenly tired. Money. Is that it? You want us to pay you back right away? Yes, that would be a start. The full 88,000 plus interest. That's impossible. We told you, most of it's spent or allocated. Then unspend it. Cancel the cruise. Return the TV. Sell the furniture. My mother looked horrified. We can't do that. What would people think? Perhaps they'd think you're facing the consequences of theft. My father's face showed a calculation taking place behind his eyes. Look, maybe we can work something out. A payment plan. Something reasonable. $5,000 a month until the full amount is repaid, I said. Plus 5% interest. 5,000. That's ridiculous. We can't possibly afford that. Then I suggest you start selling assets. The new car, perhaps. Your vacation property at Lake Chelan that you didn't think I knew about. They exchanged shocked glances. Apparently, they had underestimated how much I had discovered about their finances during my investigation. And there's one more condition, I continued. Both of you will attend financial counseling. Real counseling, not just a one-time session. And you'll provide me with complete transparency about your finances until the debt is repaid. This is extortion, my father sputtered. No, this is accountability. You stole from me. You committed fraud. These are the consequences. My mother's tears had dried up, replaced by a calculating look similar to my father's. And if we agree to your terms, you'll fix this mortgage situation. I'll inform the lender that I was mistaken about some of the issues, which might help your case. But I won't lie for you, and I won't be your guarantor again. Ever? You would really let the bank take our home? My father asked, disbelief evident in his voice. Family doesn't steal from family, I said simply. A heavy silence filled the room. My parents looked at each other, having one of their silent conversations. Finally, my father turned back to me. We'll need time to consider your terms. You have 24 hours. After that, I'll let the mortgage fraud investigation proceed without any input from me. This isn't how children are supposed to treat their parents, my mother said, attempting one last guilt trip. And parents aren't supposed to steal their children's life savings, I countered. Yet here we are. They left shortly after, my father muttering vague threats about legal action as they went. I knew they were empty threats. Any lawyer would take one look at the evidence and advise them to settle immediately. Back in my apartment, I experienced a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for the parents I had wished for but never had. Relief at finally standing up for myself. Anxiety about the confrontation. But primarily, a profound sense of peace. For 30 years, I had been at the mercy of their manipulation and exploitation. Today, I had finally said enough. That night, I slept deeply for the first time since discovering the theft. Whatever happened next, I had taken back control of my life and my future. The nightmare wasn't over, but I was no longer its victim. 2 weeks after confronting my parents in my apartment building, the mortgage company completed their investigation. As expected, they found substantial evidence of fraud and misrepresentation. My parents received formal notice that their loan terms would be significantly adjusted, with their interest rate increasing by 3 percentage points and a demand for additional collateral to secure the loan. They faced the very real possibility of foreclosure, if they couldn't meet these new terms. My mother called me sobbing, while my father sent angry emails blaming me for their predicament. I maintained my position, reminding them that these were the consequences of their own actions, not mine. Their attempts to rally the family against me largely backfired. In their desperation, they had revealed more details about taking my money than they had intended, including the exact amount. $88,000 was too substantial for even the most loyal family members to dismiss as a simple misunderstanding. My Aunt Susan, who had initially berated me, called to apologize after learning the full story. "I had no idea it was that much money, Eli," she said. "They told us it was a few thousand you had promised them for house repairs." Other family members reached out similarly, many sharing their own stories of financial manipulation by my parents over the years. A pattern emerged of borrowed money never repaid, of guilt used as a weapon, of my parents living beyond their means while demanding support from relatives. I wasn't their only victim, just their most profitable one. During these weeks, I maintained firm boundaries. I blocked my parents' numbers on my phone, allowing communication only through email. I made it clear to extended family that I wouldn't discuss my parents or the situation with them unless they respected my decisions. Some family members couldn't accept this boundary and faded from my life. Others, to my surprise, expressed admiration for my stance. "It took guts to do what you did," my cousin Thomas told me. "Most people would have just taken the loss to avoid conflict." My therapy sessions with Dr. Thompson continued, focusing on processing the grief of family estrangement. Because that's what it was. Grief. Despite their flaws, despite the exploitation, these were the people who had raised me. Accepting that our relationship would never be what I had hoped for was painful. "You're mourning the parents you deserved but never had," Dr. Thompson explained. "That's a legitimate loss." The work environment became an unexpected source of support. Nate had introduced me to several colleagues who became friends, inviting me to dinners, game nights, and weekend hikes. For the first time, I began to understand what my friend had meant about chosen family. These were people who respected my boundaries, who gave without expectation of return, who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. 6 months after the confrontation, I received a formal letter from my parents' attorney. I braced myself for a lawsuit, but instead found a proposed settlement agreement. They would pay back the full $88,000 over 3 years, with modest interest. They would attend financial counseling, as I had demanded. And they requested limited, supervised contact moving forward. The letter included a brief statement that I knew must have cost my father tremendous pride to authorize. Michael and Diana Johnson acknowledge the inappropriate transfer of funds from their son's account and express regret for their actions. It wasn't an apology, not really. There was no acknowledgement of the emotional damage, the breach of trust, or the years of manipulation. But it was something, a crack in the wall of denial and entitlement they had maintained for decades. After consulting with Miranda, I accepted the terms with additional safeguards. Payments would go through an escrow account, counseling attendance would be verified by a third party, and any contact would initially take place in my therapist's office. My parents reluctantly agreed. Our first meeting was awkward and tense. My mother attempted her usual emotional manipulation, but Dr. Thompson gently redirected the conversation whenever it veered into unhealthy territory. My father sat stiffly, clearly uncomfortable being in a therapist's office. They both seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating than the powerful figures who had loomed so large in my life. "I want to understand," I said during that session. "Did you ever see me as anything more than a resource to exploit?" My mother looked genuinely shocked. Of course we did. You're our son. Then why take my money? Why steal from my future? My father shifted uncomfortably. We didn't think of it as stealing. We just needed it more than you did. That's not your decision to make, Dr. Thompson interjected. Eli is an adult. His money is his to decide how to use. We're his parents, my mother insisted, though with less conviction than before. Parents who support their children's independence, Dr. Thompson replied. Not parents who undermine it for their own benefit. These sessions continued monthly, making small but measurable progress. My parents began making regular payments as agreed. They attended financial counseling, initially just to satisfy the agreement, but eventually with some genuine engagement. My mother even called once to share something she had learned about budgeting, a small but meaningful indication that perhaps some change was possible. I maintained my focus on rebuilding my savings and advancing my career. A year after the theft, I had been promoted to lead developer and had saved nearly half of what I needed for a down payment. The structured repayments from my parents helped, but more important was the freedom from the financial exploitation that had drained my resources for years. Our relationship remained strictly bounded. I didn't share personal information beyond what was necessary. I didn't seek their approval or validation. I didn't expect them to change fundamentally, though I acknowledged the small improvements they had made. 2 years after that horrible birthday morning, I closed on a small house in Fremont, a quirky neighborhood that reminded me of where my grandfather had lived. It wasn't the house I had originally envisioned, but it was mine, free from any financial entanglements with my parents. The day I moved in, surrounded by friends who had taken a Saturday to help carry furniture and unpack boxes, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. That evening, sitting on my back porch looking at the small vegetable garden I had already started planning, I reflected on everything that had happened. The theft had been devastating, but it had forced me to confront truths I had been avoiding my entire adult life. It had pushed me to set boundaries I should have established years earlier. It had shown me who my real support system was, and it wasn't defined by blood or obligation. Most importantly, it had taught me that my worth wasn't determined by what I could provide to others. I deserved respect and honesty simply because I was a human being. This lesson had transformed not just my relationship with my parents, but all my relationships, allowing me to recognize and avoid people who saw me as a resource rather than a person. As for my parents, we maintained our structured, limited contact. They never fully acknowledged the harm they had caused, but they respected the boundaries I had established, perhaps recognizing it was the only way to maintain any relationship with me. Their financial counseling had apparently helped them develop better habits, and they had sold their house for a more modest one they could actually afford. The journey from victim to advocate was unexpected but fulfilling. I began volunteering with a nonprofit that helped young adults establish financial independence, sharing my story as a warning about family financial abuse. Each time I spoke to a group and saw recognition in someone's eyes, I felt that my experience served a purpose beyond my own growth. Creating a home based on respect and trust became my focus, filling it with chosen family who showed up consistently without expectations or conditions. These connections, built on mutual respect rather than obligation, brought a richness to my life I hadn't known was possible. The deepest lesson, though, was about self-worth. No one has the right to exploit you, no matter their relationship to you. Standing up against abuse isn't selfish or ungrateful. It's an act of self-preservation and ultimately self-respect. True family, whether blood or chosen, builds you up rather than tears you down. They celebrate your success rather than resent it. They give freely without keeping score. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have confronted your parents or let the theft go in the name of family peace? Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for themselves, even against family. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, you deserve respect simply because you exist, not because of what you can provide to others.